After over a year of its release, I finally bought Elden Ring, and I decided to try to beat it. Here's how it went. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the details because the game's been out for over a year, so I'm just going to show you guys most of the bosses I've beaten, and I'm going to tell you guys the strategies I used to beat them. Alright, so the first boss of the game is Margit the Fell Omen. For Margit, I stuck with my base weapon and used little help from Rogier because I was still a little bit underleveled at the time. I used the fire juice to inflict more damage and to try to make the fight a little bit more easier for myself. And I'm gonna be honest, at the time, this boss was a real struggle because I was still trying to get used to the Elden Ring playstyle. And as you guys will see throughout this whole video, I'm a very greedy player. I would try to go for as many hits as I can, and sometimes that leads to my death. But I don't know, that's just how I play the game. The reason why I stuck with the katana was because I had a little bit of bleed buildup, which is very useful for most bosses, especially in the late game. The reason why I love using summons in the game was because they would always take the aggro off and they gave you time to heal or cast a spell if you wanted to. Rogier ended up dying, but it was all good because Margit was finally defeated and it was one less boss I had to deal with. As I obtained the new talisman pouch and I saw Margit fall right before me, I felt so proud of myself and it kept me going to beat the next boss. Here I upgrade my character, and as you can see, I beat Margit at level 11. The samurai starts off at level 9, so I only leveled up twice, and that was a big thing for me at the time. It's not too impressive, but I still surprised myself. I was able to level up 6 more times with the runes that Margit gave me, and that was huge. I realized I was still a little bit under leveled for Godric, so I decided to fight a few more bosses to get runes to level up. This boss was pretty fun because it wasn't too much of a challenge. It was perfect for my skill level. His frost breath was a struggle. It ended up killing me a few times, but I still managed to beat him. Now it was time for Godric. I used my wolf spears to help me with the fight, but most of the time they were useless, but this attempt was really good. I found a new weapon called the Bloodhound's Fang, which I ended up using for the entire game, but Godric's attacks took me a few tries to learn, but altogether I would say it took me a good 20 minutes to figure out all of his attacks and to actually beat him. My wolves managed to somewhat stay alive for a second stage, but it was still a big help. The second phase was tricky for me because of his fire attacks, but eventually I managed to beat him. Another thing about the Bloodhound Fang was that it had more bleed buildup than the katana, which is extremely useful for the fight.
I am the Lord of all that is golden.
As Godric fell before me, I realized I can beat the game with just a little bit more practice.
To our home, bathed in rays of gold.
Then for the fun of it, I just defeated this mini boss for the runes, and it was enough to get me leveled up a few more times. Then I went on to this catacomb, but I realized after defeating Godric, I was way over leveled for this fight. Now it was time for Renala. At the time, I think I was around level 30, but this fight didn't take me too long. I think it was about 5 tries or less. This is an extremely easy boss compared to the other ones in this game. I still ended up using my wolves because they were still pretty useful at the time. After smacking up a few per librarians, I ended up getting past Renala's first stage, which was extremely easy, and now it's time for the second stage. The trick to this phase is just to run around in circles and close the gap little by little, but my wolves were doing work on Renala. She had no chance to breathe. Look at that. My wolves ended up dying, but that was no problem because, like I said before, Renala is an extremely easy boss. I wanted to do part of Rani's quest line because the next boss I needed to defeat was Radahn. In order to get to Rani, I needed to defeat Loretta, so I just kept using the same strategy that I used with the other bosses. Then I decided to go level up, just a little bit though. I go to Radahn and I immediately went for the summons that the game offers you, because I was not about to go fight Radahn by myself. Then I decided to grind just a little bit more. Now Godfrey wasn't as hard as I thought he would be, but then again, I had my Mimic and I was a little bit over leveled after those 2 million runes. But what you'll start to see is that I just go for attacks now and I stop worrying about my health, which is something you should never do in a Souls game. My Mimic ended up giving the last hit, but I still took it as a win. Now Morgoth was somewhat easy too because of my Mimic, but in this fight you'll see my greediness really show. I ended up rotting him somewhere throughout the fight, and I didn't even have to do a lot of work. It was all the Scarlet Rot. Then I decided to fight these 2 crystal looking people, and I defeated them for the bell bearing that I'm gonna get to upgrade my weapons. Now it was time for the Fire Giant. With my Mimic, this fight was easier, but I still struggled a whole lot. I think I spent around 40 minutes just learning his attacks because they seemed impossible to figure out. I ended up memorizing most of his attacks in like my last few attempts, but the fight was still really hard regardless. Then, after the Fire Giant, I decided to set a tree on fire and sacrifice my maiden.
Shall one day meet the road of destiny.
And then I tried helping my friend beat the Fire Giant, and you can imagine how that went. After all of that, it was time for the Godskin duo, and thanks to my Mimic, it was a pretty easy boss and it took me around 3 tries. After defeating the Godskin duo, I decided to max out my first weapon, which was Morgoth's, and then I never used it again. Now Malekith was the first boss I actually struggled on. His attacks were way too fast for me to actually react to them. So I decided to use a different weapon. I decided to use Rivers of Blood, which was really effective against Malekith. Godfrey was pretty straightforward because I fought his spirit kind of thing earlier in the game, so it didn't end up being too difficult.
Tarnished. Thy strength befits a crown.
Before I defeat the last boss in the game, which is Radagon and the Elden Beast, I wanted to try out Moog, and believe it or not, I actually beat him on my first try.
I can see it as clear as day. The coming of our dynasty. Morgwin.
At this point, I have tried Radagon many times now, and he was still too difficult for me, even with my Mimic. So I decided to change my weapon for the first phase of the fight, which were the Iron Balls, and as you'll see, they do pretty good damage. So now for the Elden Beast, I decided to switch back to my main weapon, and as you'll see, it still does pretty good damage, and I'll just let the fight play out. I finally did it. I beat Elden Ring by myself for the first time, and after 25 hours of playing, I finally felt accomplished. This game was really fun and I would definitely play it again. This is probably the only Elden Ring video I'll ever post because I don't really intend on doing much more besides Millennia. Either way, thank you for those who stayed until the end, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.